This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. In this episode, we're speaking to researcher Matt Koonce about the militant resistance faction in Palestine known as Lion's Den. Koonce is going to be talking to us about why Lion's Den is different and why they're gaining so much popularity, specifically amongst the youth of Palestine. Lion's Den is a little bit different from previous factions. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, please do consider supporting us at patreon.com/popularfront or popularfront.co/support. Let's start this off by talking about January 26th, 2023. There was a big raid. Israelis went into Jenin. Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians. I believe 2 of them were definitely civilians. Some claim others were civilians. Militant groups have claimed some of the dead as fighters. It's one of this, one of the other. But around that situation, it was, a lot of footage was released from the IDF. Didn't look like they were taking much care at all, in my opinion, for civilians. They were firing RPGs into residential neighborhoods. Couldn't really see where they were firing. But around that time, there was a lot of talk suddenly about this group, the Lion's Den. I saw it on Telegram. I saw it on social media. People are saying, right, the Lion's Den will get revenge for this. And I was surprised because this was a group I hadn't heard that much about. It wasn't people saying, Al-Qassam will get revenge for this, or Fatah will get revenge for this, or, Al-Quds forces will get revenge for this. It was very much Lion's Den from what I was seeing. So what is that? What is the Lion's Den and what role do they have there?
I'll start from the beginning. The Lion's Den was formed in February of 2022. It was formed by 4 different guys, all under the age of 25. It was, I got their names right here. Well, number one, most people might recognize is Ibrahim Nabulsi, known as the Lion of Nablus. He was killed in August, I believe, in a raid. He was 18 years old. There was also 21-year-old Ashraf Mubaslat, 21-year-old Mohammed Al-Dakhil, 26 or 25-year-old Adham Mabruka, Al-Shashani, which is Arabic for the Chechen. I apologize if I butchered those names right there. But anyways, so those last 3 that I had mentioned were actually all killed in a raid together on February 8th, I guess almost a year ago now at this point, since the 7th. But so basically, those 4 had come together. They were all just residents of Nablus, grew up in Nablus, and they started to come together on nights and essentially just sit in the alleys of the old city of Nablus. And this was, you look at 2021, there was a lot of violence, particularly in Gaza, but it started to see sort of this shift in the West Bank towards this mindset of almost like the second Intifada, where just clashes every chance, in every town. And anyway, so these 4 guys came together, and they originally called themselves the Nablus Brigade, naming themselves after the Jenin Brigade, who's been in the news quite a bit for over the past year. That was where Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered when she was covering clashes between the Jenin Brigade and the IDF. So they essentially followed form, and this sort of new what's the word for it? Sort of organization of, funnily enough, it's basically a popular front is what it is, where all these different guys from all different types of, factions, whether it's Fatah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, they're all kind of coming together. They're doing their own thing in their own time, but at night they are coming together, sleeping in the alleys of the camp, just kind of, they have a motto, and this is kind of like what they live by. They say, "No incursion without a clash." That's the group ethos. So their ideology is, even if we get killed, every time they come in, we need to clash with them because we can't, set precedents where they can just come and go as they please. And so that's kind of where it all comes from. It's really just these young guys coming together despite political differences and just saying, this is our town. We're going to protect the residents. If you're going to come in, then, you're going to pay in blood, whether it's our blood or your blood, blood is going to spill basically.
Right. So it's essentially a joint operations room.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting because all of the political factions, which are, historically very territorial over everything, whether it's arms or planning or personnel, they've really all kind of come together and been like, this is a good thing. Like, please continue this. So actually, the Palestinian administration, the Palestinian administration's security forces arrested a Hamas operative or militant, whatever you'd like to call him, in Nablus. I believe that was not too long ago. I want to say September, and they basically arrested him because he was providing, I don't think the charges ever fully came out, but it was basically, he was providing assistance to the Lion's Den, which, we can get into that later, that whole situation, but it basically set off a lot of violence between the Palestinian security forces and the Lion's Den. So, the people of Nablus, rather. So
it's a joint operations room. You mentioned briefly there which groups, were kind of involved, but right now I know it's kind of evolved and changed several times. What's the kind of demographic of the Lion's Den right now? Which groups are officially a part of this?
So what's interesting is this is a running theme in Palestinian, militant politics or history, whatever you want to call it, of whenever someone's killed, a lot of groups will claim it, particularly when they don't release, a statement beforehand saying, we did it. So I was having a very hard time of nailing down exactly who belongs to who, but I do believe that one of Al-Shishani, the Chechen, one of the founders, he was claimed by Fatah, as well as two of the others. But I've seen photographs of Nabulsi, Mabaslat, and Dakhil all wearing the PFLP sashes. So I don't know for certain. However, I have seen a lot of Hamas, I guess you could say, headwear and banners and stuff. So I really can't say for certain. Like, there's not one group that's sort of like the main, group in here. I would say maybe Fatah, just by virtue of them having, more support historically within places like Jenin and Nablus, but it really is all of them. So it's not. They do their best to try and keep politics out of it, I guess, which is difficult because that's certainly one of the places where Israel or even the Palestinian administration try to exploit, divide and conquer. But I think they've realized that that's the goal, and that's kind of pushed them more together to try and just be, a unified unit, basically.
Yeah, and what I find interesting with the Lion's Den, correct me if I'm wrong, but they've done something a little bit different that other groups have not done so much in recent years, whereby instead of just being a kind of hit and run guerrilla unit, they're sort of acting as a Palestinian security force. So they will be out on the streets. They have uniforms. They wear all black. They have these shoulder patches. A lot of them have the bucket hat with the Lion's Den logo on it. If anyone can get me one of them. But yeah, they just look very cool, very interesting artifact to have. They act like a security force rather than just a kind of hit and run group. They're on the ground. They're doing patrols. That seems different to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something I would love to talk about because I find it very interesting.
Mm.
Like something a lot of people compare it to is 2015's Jerusalem Intifada, or also known as the Knives Intifada, where it basically saw, where there was this uptick in Israeli raids in the West Bank, and there was a lot of Palestinians being killed. And what you saw was a lot of people, mostly young men, some young women taking in East Jerusalem, taking knives and carrying out, solo operations, attacks, and it was very individualistic, and it didn't have a huge benefit for the Palestinian people. It was cracked down on very fast by Israel. They further cracked down on Palestinian civil rights when people started being stabbed. So it made things a lot. I wouldn't say a lot worse, but it certainly wasn't very beneficial. Now compare that to the Lion's Den, where like the Israeli army knows where these guys are. They know where they live. They know where their families live. So I've seen footage and audio from phone calls where Shin Bet is literally calling these guys on the phone saying, we're coming for you next. If you don't turn yourself in to either, the Palestinian administration or to us, we're going to come in and kill you. And it's like they I think in a couple cases they have turned themselves into PA, but most times they just say understood. That's kind of understood basically. And so they. Yeah, exactly. And it's very much like we're not going anywhere. Like, you're right. Like it's interesting because the Lion's Den isn't really sending their members into, Tel Aviv to carry out operations or anything like that. They are in Nablus. That is their home. And they basically are just, they're like, we're not going anywhere. If you want to come and get us, come and get us. And they've totally revolutionized. Like, I was going to make this comparison, but it's very similar to anyone familiar with the troubles with, the Bogside in Derry or Ballymurphy Housing Estate in Belfast, where it's like they are so popular amongst the local population that it makes it so much easier for them to operate as compared to, the PA. Like I'll even drop a quote that I had in mind while I was doing this. I'm not a Maoist, but Mao actually said something very kind of on point with this. He said, from guerrilla warfare, the popular masses are like water and the army is like a fish. How then can it be said that when there is water, a fish will have difficulty in preserving its existence? An army which fails to maintain good discipline gets into opposition with the popular masses, and thus by its own action dries up water. Now, I had that in mind when I was doing research, but I was like, that's kind of unrelated or whatever. But then I realized 3 of the 4 founders of the Lion's Den are Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine activists. So I'm sure that they're probably aware of this, this knowledge of, you need the local populace to operate. And the Palestinian administration, who's supposed to be doing their job, has become so corrupted and abuses their citizens on such a daily basis that they don't have that sort of like groundswell of support that would be able to protect them. Say, Israel one day wanted to come for the PA, so it's really kind of made them to be very, very untouchable in a sense. Like, I mean, they send raids in every week almost, and there's still over 20 fighters operating on a nightly basis.
Yeah, and they seem very popular amongst the youth from what I've gathered.
Oh, it's insane. It really is something else. It's they have over, I think last time I checked, there was over 150, almost 200,000 followers on their Telegram channel. I mean, that's insane. That's more than, most political factions. So like established political factions. So and they're also huge on TikTok. I've seen a lot of like edits of their fighters, a lot of the Bulsi. So it really is sort of just like appealing to these young people. And it's really interesting because there's 2 specific aspects, I think, that are driving this shift from, supporting traditional political factions to supporting the Lion's Den. I think number 1 is the huge increase in settlements in the West Bank over the past 8 years, I would say 6-8 years, as well as the authority of the Palestinian, or the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, which is ostensibly supposed to be the ones protecting them. So just like as far as settlement goes. So I don't know how familiar people are with the situation, but there are over 700,000 Israeli settlers in East Jerusalem and the West Bank combined. It's illegal under international law. And what this does is it really has prevented freedom of movement in the West Bank for people from, any city. Basically, these cities, it's very hard to navigate between them. If you look at a map, Nablus and Jenin are very close by, but a lot of the times it's almost impossible to get there because of, Israeli raids or closing roads or whatever.
And I should say, just for the listeners that are unaware, the Israeli settlers, the people that have moved into Palestinian areas, set up shop there, set up their homes when they could just live in the rest of Israel, but they choose to live forcibly in the areas, what's left of land for the Palestinians, and they're protected by Israeli forces and whatnot, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a textbook definition of apartheid. There's two separate rules of law. There is Israeli law for the Israeli settlers, and there's military law for Palestinians who are living under military occupation. So it's, the settlers, they have their own highways to drive on. They have all their own resources, whether it's water, electricity. So and they basically siphon this off from the Palestinian areas. So it's hard to understand this without putting yourself in these guys' shoes. But when you grow up in an area and there is so clearly a privileged class and an underclass, it's hard not to sort of understand where they're coming from when they say, we're going to go out and confront this, because that's supposed to be the PA's job in the Oslo Accords. They're supposed to be the ones taking care of that, the ones limiting the advance of settlements. So that's one of the reasons. And the other is the corruption of the authority. They're ostensibly a democratic organization, but they haven't had an election since I think in 14 years. Basically, when Yasser Arafat died, there was an election in the Palestinian Council, and Mahmoud Abbas became elected. He's who is in power now, and it's a very corrupt kind of old guard mentality in this, and it's Palestine has changed so much over the last 20 years, and they have not changed with it. And it's really, really causing huge stratification between, the people and the people that are supposed to be protecting them. So that's sort of where these groups are coming in.
Right. And if anyone doesn't know, again, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, they're essentially officially in charge of the Palestinian territories. They have a uneasy but a partnership essentially with Israel, right? Why is it that they have been, I don't know, allowed to get to this stage? How come? They're undemocratic. They're clearly not helpful. The Palestinian people, I don't think I've ever met anyone in Palestine that has said anything positive about the PA. Certainly not when I was there last. Why is it that they've kind of just been allowed to exist still at this stage? Is it that there's no other political parties that can step into their place? I know it's not that, but you know what I mean? Why is it?
It is in a sense, and it's essentially they have gotten the okay from Israel to be the representative faction for the Palestinian people. Like they're the safe choice basically, and so Israel loves having that sort of corrupt old guard in there. They rub their feet, give them whatever they want, as long as, they keep the Palestinians in check. Sort of that mentality. And the PA is not at all afraid to crack down on opposition from anywhere, really, unless it's from Israel. But they're no strangers to just kidnapping and torturing political activists. They really behave no better than thugs. It's this sort of corruption that no young man growing up wanting to fight the Israeli occupation that's been keeping him downtrodden for 20 years is going to go to the PA, who, for all intents and purposes, are just doing the the Israelis sort of dirty work. And I say this, but it's interesting because after that deadly raid that you were talking about at the beginning of the episode, they said that they are suspending security coordination with Israel because right now, or before rather, they would be in contact with Israel when Israel wanted to do a raid. They would theoretically let them know. A lot of the time they didn't, but that's the sort of spirit of security coordination. So right now they're actually not coordinating, but I think what we're starting to see is sort of like this mad scramble for the PA to gain some sort of popular support now that they realize that, like, hey, we're not the only option for these people. Like, if they can support the Lions Den, then that doesn't mean good things for us. We're probably going the way of the dinosaur or whatever. So I think that's probably why they did that. But I think it's a little too late as far as having people support the Palestinian Authority.
And what have the PA said about the Lions Den? Have they shown support? I mean, I think it would be very difficult for them to go against them directly, considering how much popularity they seem to have, especially amongst the youth.
Yeah, absolutely. And they know that. They've even said it so themselves. So I'll read for you. The United States, in all their arrogant glory, they proposed a plan to Israel to take care of the Lions Den because Israel's been having such a hard time. If Israel can't do it, then I'm sure the United States can't. But they proposed this plan to curb Palestinian violence by creating this Palestinian Authority, sort of like strike force, I guess you can say, of Palestinians who are going to be militarily trained either by Israel or by the United States to go and fight the Lions Den. Palestinian Authority was like, no, we're not doing that, basically. They know that they don't have the popular support to do that. And also, it didn't require any concessions from Israel. So they were like, you know what, we're not going to take this idea when we're the only ones being negatively affected by it. So, I actually have a statement here from a senior Lions Den member to a reporter, Eunice Tirawi. And he says, to sum it up in response to the plan, he says, to sum it up, we are Palestinians. We don't raise our weapons on the PA, even upon our own security forces. We have nothing to do with them. Despite everything, they are Palestinians. May God lead them to the truth. This alleged combat force will come from people that lack dignity and morals. These are the same men that shot and subjugated the people back in September. So what he's referencing there is that Hamas operative who was arrested by the Palestinian Authority in September, and during it, there was a 53-year-old man shot and killed, civilian. They don't know if it was the PA or Lions Den, but it was basically killed, and that's left a very sour taste in a lot of people in Nablus' mouth. And so they say, in short, whoever tries to assault Nablus, we may get burned, but we will burn them with us. Try to move the wasp's nest and see how many wasps come out to sting you. So the last part was slightly paraphrased, but so a lot of Fatah members who work with the Lions Den are also very well ingratiated with the Palestinian Authority. So I think that there's too much overlap between the two groups. Like, I really do think that there are fighters who are working in both capacities as Lions Den members, and I wouldn't go as far as to say as PASF, but I would certainly say, Fatah members. So I don't think that we're going to see a big fight between the Lions Den and the PA anytime soon. I think we're more likely to see it between Israel and the Lions Den. But only time can tell.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting situation. Ideologically, where do the Lions Den sit? Do you think that they're kind of gravitating to one direction more than the other? I know it's a mix of various different ideological groups, but when that happens, even when it is meant to be a mix, there's always one ideology or one kind of ethos that shines through. Are you seeing any signs like that yet with the Lions Den?
I would say maybe some. Honestly, I can't really say that they've really made many political statements. I would say if anything, they're certainly very supportive of, Islamist factions, PIJ and Hamas. I've seen a lot of members with that, but that also might just be, they know who's feeding them sort of ideology. But I don't think so. No, honestly, I really think that they've done a very good job of remaining focused on like the fact that like their enemy is the occupation, and anything else is just a distraction from that, and distractions that they know that Israel has exploited very well. So they do their best to sort of I guess stay away from that.
The thing is, though, even in some of their statements, it sounds a lot like the kind of shit that Hamas would say.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, as far as I am aware, they are all Muslim. So I think that that's where a lot of like when you see, all glory to God and all these, traditional things you would see within Islamist branches. I again, I don't really think that that's an indication so much of like an Islamist bend to them. It certainly could be indicative of that, but I think a lot of it is just, I think it certainly is modeled after sort of like the classic Hamas press releases with the big kind of grandiose language and whatnot. But like I said, I don't think that, should they take, in a alternate universe, if they were to take control and have some sort of like political responsibility, I wouldn't be totally certain that it would be anything really. Again, it's really hard to say, but I would say from the way that they've been behaving, it's much more of like a democratic sort of alliance than anything else.
What has been Hamas's response to this? Because obviously Hamas are one of the other strong militant groups out there. I remember when I was in Jerusalem in 2018, Palestinians even there were saying like, yeah, like Hamas has actually like kind of more powerful here than Fatah or whatever. I know that like Hamas is kind of involved with it, but what is their role? What's their response?
Yeah, so Hamas has actually been doing a very, I guess, like a very good job, for from their perspective of sort of spreading through the West Bank. And again, this is sort of the same thing with the Lion's Den, where it's like just they're filling this vacuum created by the Palestinian Authority and Israel of like protection for the people. And so I don't know the listeners if they've seen what just happened in Jericho either yesterday or the day before. Basically, there were five people killed in Jericho in the West Bank. And Israel claimed that they were all basically a Hamas cell. So it's very ongoing. And I have seen quite a few Hamas flags, Hamas, headwear in Nablus. So I think that, in my opinion, I think it really comes from they basically saw what Hamas did to Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. They kicked them out of Gaza through armed struggle, and I think that is something that really resonates with the Palestinian people in the West Bank right now. So, I really do think it's sort of just seizing that sort of momentum that Hamas has created through like not being afraid of going into combat or launching missiles or whatever. So yeah, you're right. Hamas is absolutely proliferating throughout the West Bank. I haven't seen enough to where I'd be like, the PAs better watch out. I mean, they certainly should be watching out right now, but it's not, I think that it's not as dangerous to Israel or the PA as Lion's Den, because Israel is like, Israel in a sense needs Islamist factions like Hamas, because that just further justifies their sort of like quote unquote war on terror. And no one in the West bats an eye when Islamists are killed. Like it's just sort of like, oh, well, they were Taliban or Al Qaeda or whatever they say. So I think that Israel is going to target Hamas all day long, but it's those groups like the Lion's Den, which are formed from a groundswell of public support. They aren't anti-Semitic. They don't go on, crazy rants about Jews. It's very hard for Israel to point a finger and be like terrorists. They do, but it's a lot more disingenuous than when they do it to people like Hamas or whatever. So I really think that it's going to be groups like the Lions Den that have the sort of staying power to kind of weather that storm. I mean, Hamas has been putting up a very big fight against Israel in the West Bank. We'll see, if it continues in that direction. But I think that Israel is much, much more determined to kill Hamas, factions than the Lion's Den in particular, just because of international support and domestic support and all that. So
yeah, no, it's a good point. I'm sure a lot of people will say, no, that's not true. It is true. Go and read Hamas. Get Hamas's communiques from Arabic translated into English. There's a big difference. It's like the difference between AJ Plus and Al Jazeera Arabic. It's like AJ Plus is like, everything's cool, everything's woke. Al Jazeera Arabic is like, you will burn in hell if you do this. That's just facts. And it's kind of like that. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's kind of like that. And yeah, you're right. I mean, like, if someone that wants to literally destroy what I think is okay, like being equal, then and they get killed, I mean, you're like, tough shit. But you're saying that the Lions Den have been a lot more like clever, a lot more diplomatic, and I guess they just, obviously they don't have the same ideology. I don't think it would really benefit them to lie about what they're thinking. Yeah, so I guess what would their kind of general PR be like? What kinds of things are they coming out with? What is it that's pulling people in within Palestine? And something I will say here as well, I've seen this idea several times online. It's like, oh, all Palestinians are actually jihadists. They don't mind this, that, and the other. That's fucking nonsense. And secondly, people will just support whoever is kind of helping them. It's not that everybody is going to check the ideology first. Certainly in a lot of, popular wars in Europe right now, certainly a lot of journalists think it's okay to ignore an ideology of a group, but then they don't when it's in a different place where people are. So yeah, what's their kind of PR?
So I'll address how they use PR, but there's some statistics I have here from the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research to your point, and it's basically talking about the Lion's Den. So this is different from Hamas. It's saying, so they polled the people in the West Bank, and 72% believe that more of these Lion Den groups should form. This sort of popular front of militants to protect these villages. 79% reject turning them into the PA. And 87% reject the notion that the Palestinian Authority has the authority to arrest them. So they are absolutely super popular, which is different from, Hamas. Like you said, not everyone is, not every Palestinian is prone to support, every single person who supports the Palestinian cause. But it's a lot easier to support these people who, like you were saying, don't have this sort of avowed political stance. But I will talk about the way that the Lion's Den uses sort of publicity, and it's mostly through, like I mentioned, Telegram and TikTok. It's really incredible. Like, honestly, sort of just seeing the way that the 21st century is shaping like the way that these groups operate. Because you look at oh gosh, I don't even have a good example, honestly. I mean, yeah, but basically, like I said, they have, I wish I had the number of like how many are on their Telegram right now, but it's hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, the youth are the youth, youth anywhere, they're the same.
Yeah, exactly. And when you deprive the youth of like an entire generation of youth, basic freedoms, the freedom to walk to school without getting attacked by a settler, or, freedom to vote, or freedom to travel, or whatever, they, like, the youth don't take that on the chin 9 times out of 10. And you look at history, like, they're going to fight back eventually. And this is the sort of like perfect avenue for them. They're it's different from joining Hamas, or it's different from anything really. Like it's popular. You're going to be popular if you join. It's like, and the other thing is sort of like, and this is something that we see a lot of times within Palestinian factions, but this sort of almost like understanding and respect for martyrdom. And these young men, they've fully accepted in their mind, like, we're going to be killed protecting this camp. And in so many cases already, they've been proven right. They've been killed. I mean, when Ibrahim Nabulsi was killed, he had a chance to run. There's incredibly dramatic footage of it when it was happening. He was under raid, and he had already been on the run for months at this point. And his friends are begging him to leave, trying to pull him away from the window where he was firing. And he was just shoved them away. He was like, they're coming for me, and they're going to keep coming, and they're going to kill whoever stands in between, me and them. And I don't want you guys getting killed. So now's my time, basically. And he just went out fighting. So, and oh my God, you should see the sort of like TikTok edits of that, and like, things on Twitter. And it's like, it's this sort of like mythology around them, where it's like, these guys are literally like lions. Like, one of the world's strongest militaries is getting, kicked in the teeth basically by some 20-year-olds from Nablus. So right, I think that's kind of where it all comes from. And yeah, exactly. It's like, it's like, it's not like carrying out like a shooting of, unarmed people or anything like that. Like it's like such righteous, justified kind of rage towards like invading forces that it's hard for anyone to stand by and be like, that's wrong. Like, what you're doing is wrong. Because I think anyone in the same situation would see the lion's den and be like, okay, there's some form of, salvation, basically.
It seems a lot more grassroots. It seems a lot more of the people of the locality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, there's also groups popping up in places like in Balata refugee camp, which is on the southern part of Nablus. They have I believe it's the Balata battalion, and the Jenin brigade, which is was formed before the Nablus brigade, actually. And it's just these sort of popular fronts of all different types of militants coming together and just protecting the camp. And what another interesting thing is the way that they've sort of utilized the towns. They know these towns like the back of their hands, so they've sort of like welded together these improvised, Czech hedgehogs, and they've drilled holes for bollards to stick in whenever Israelis start raiding. So, and they have a whole alert system using young people to sort of alert basically when there's people coming into the camp. So they've really kind of done a good job of using the camp and the town to their advantage.
And is Nablus still their stronghold?
Yes, yeah, and I think that while other groups similar to that are going to form in other towns, the Lion's Den, I don't believe are going to leave Nablus. I think that Nablus is their den. If that makes sense. Like, that's why they're doing it. So I don't think that specifically the Lion's Den is going to spread outside Nablus, but I do think that, like, I saw, I think it was in Jericho, there was a group that came up called the Wasp's Nest. I haven't seen much claimed by them though, but it just goes to show like this sort of template for armed groups is popular. It's probably going to spread.
Yeah, and do you know if there's any? Well, I imagine there's some, but what's the communication like between, for example, like the Jenin Brigade and the other groups? Because they are very similar in their makeup to the Lion's Den, right? Like young people coming together, doing patrols, stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, and they're very much in contact. I wouldn't say that they are like operationally cohesive. I haven't seen them operating together. I do know that whenever they're operating in one of the towns, they'll generally close the road to the other. So I think that speaks to sort of Israeli fears of them coming, because it's fast. I don't know exactly how long it takes to drive there, but it's not you get over there within a half an hour, I believe. So yeah, but it's also because like when Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered, they had to close the roads from Nablus because just people were coming up, not even militants, just unarmed people were driving up there to just be angry and protest. And so so they all support each other, as you can imagine. They all will issue statements in support of one another, but as far as sort of teaming up and whatnot, I haven't seen much of that.
In terms of the Telegram channel you were on about earlier, I just got it up here. It's 236,000 plus, and that's just one of them. There are several different channels.
Yeah, like that's an insane amount of people on like a Telegram channel like that. Like that's not common.
Yeah, and there's loads of videos, edits on there, martyrs, but there's also like lots and lots of. I mean, to be honest, it's mostly text actually, which is kind of unusual for these groups. But I think a lot of this is like communiques. I mean, I don't think that Google Translate is that good at Arabic, but it's like, it's the same kind of stuff here. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, it's permitted of those who fight because they were wrong and God is able to give them victory, the great truth of God. The Lions Den groups confronted and clashed with the Zionist occupation forces with salvos of blessed bullets after they stormed the popular housing area at dawn this day. The Lions Den groups mourn the martyr of the homeland and the martyr of the city of Nablus, the capital of Jabal al-Noir. We ask God for acceptance and mercy for our hero martyr, glory and eternity to our honorable martyrs, and paradise, God willing. Now, to me, that's quite interesting. When was that posted? Today. That's quite interesting. Again, as we said earlier, they're using these terms, Zionist occupation forces. They're not saying the Jews, stuff like that, which you will very, very easily see in Hamas communiques all the time. Deeply anti-Semitic. There's no getting around it. Not to say that like you expect them to be these kind of angels, but again, the communication it is different.
It is absolutely, yeah. But like like you were saying earlier, they do use a lot of the similar language. Of course they're Muslims, so they're using a lot of glory be God and all that, but they're also using, blessed bullets and a lot of this sort of like very descriptive language, which I think is Arabic lends itself to, but it is kind of similar. Like they've definitely learned to draw up their communiques from reading other ones, basically. So it's interesting.
And I know you said earlier, okay, Lions Den is a little bit more democratic, a little bit more autonomous than some other groups in Palestine, but they're simply, it just doesn't work like that. They're completely, you cannot bring up a completely brand new resistance group in Palestine without the help of someone else from another group. It just is how it is. Who's in charge?
That's a very good question. And again, I think that speaks to sort of like how this is so like never before seen, particularly within Palestine, but in most other countries as well, where it's like this really was started by 4 guys under the age of 25, and they did have support from their original political factions. But I can't really say that it's PIJ is bankrolling this, or Hamas is bankrolling this, or PFLP. I think that it's hard to say. I mean, because those 4 men that had formed it they've been killed in the past year. So it's a good question of who's sort of calling the shots there. I would certainly like to think that it's still, the young men on the ground, but I'm sure that there are groups interested. I'm sure, groups that are trying to agitate Israel are probably going to start looking to sort of give them support. I think it's much more difficult to smuggle things into the West Bank than it is into Gaza. Like when you look at Gaza, there's it's very easy to get armaments there, basically, because they have, they have the sea there, which is under naval blockade, but it does lend itself to smuggling a little bit easier. So
Sinai as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, my point being is that I don't think that it's going to be very easy for any like outside group like Syria or Iran to be like oh, we're going to send them arms. I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think that they would even probably accept that, because again, I really think that a lot of this has to do with playing that sort of that balancing act between sort of maximizing popularity for your group amongst the Palestinian people, but at the same time, you don't want to overplay your hand and sort of just go, full Hamas, where it's like, okay, we're gonna, send a bunch of fighters to Tel Aviv and we're gonna cause mayhem. It's very different from that. So I think that sort of balancing act is kind of speaking to the fact that it's like the people on the ground there are having control. And I would like to say, it's a democratic group, but I just don't know that. I'm not familiar enough with like the day-to-day operations to say, oh, they're this democratic force. I just know that it's this sort of tent for the militants to come together under. As far as exactly who's calling the shots, I can't say.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong or anything, but I find it very hard to believe it was just those four lads came together and there was nothing from anyone else. It just, I don't know. In my experience there, it just purely through generational conflict, it just doesn't really work like that. And they are pretty well armed. Like from what I've seen, the Lions Den, they seem pretty well armed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's because all the people there, it's not like these people just went from being, geeks on the street to Lions Den members. Like they are all coming from a militant background with training and with arms. And like I said, all of the factions sort of support this. So they allow them to use their weapons in it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is, generally speaking, that is not the way it works. It's interesting. I've listened to a lot of interviews with, older people from Nablus who talk about it. And they say like, they don't remember, this generation doesn't remember the second Intifada, which was, I believe, 2000 to 2005, 2004. So it's sort of like you were saying, as far as generational conflict goes, it's like this generation is the ones that haven't sort of tasted, what the second Intifada meant, for a lot of Palestinians. Because people forget, as deadly as the second Intifada was for Israelis, that's who always gets talked about, terrorism against Israelis. But I think it's like there was probably 4 or 5 times as many Palestinians killed as Israelis during the second Intifada, just by military heavy-handedness during during protests and whatnot. And it was places like Nablus and Jenin where just it was awful. I mean, they were invaded, and there was it was basically like a war. It's just all out warfare, particularly in Jenin. So these people, these young men, they're fresh. Basically, they're saying, you guys had your chance. Now is ours. Now we're going to do the best we can. Basically, yeah, and that's interesting. I'm going to look more into that as far as who sort of put this in motion, because that's a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It quite closely, not ideologically maybe, but quite closely in many ways resembles the rise of the Yad Gahash, the essentially the PKK urban youth wing, the patriotic revolutionary youth movement. And they rose up in Jizra, and for all intents and purposes, they were like, yeah, no, we're the youth. We want to do things differently. We rose up on our own. And it's true and not true. They didn't really rise up on their own as such, because all around them were PKK commanders and people like that in the area that could help them and show them the way. But certainly a lot of their ideological stuff, the way they thought about things was, okay, yes, it's apogee, the apoism, they're very into all of that, but it was different. It was very different in terms of the way they saw the world. And in fact, some of them were a lot less ideological than their predecessors, purely based on a similar condition. Like you're saying, they hadn't really experienced the full-on war, or they were babies when it was like that. They were called the Youth of the Storm, as in they kind of grew up within it, but they weren't fighting in it, if that makes sense. And that really kind of changed. I don't want to say change, but it was an evolution of the ideology. And whilst they felt, maybe even some of them, that we actually started this grassroots ourselves, and there was signifiers actually that was true. Even the name. I mean, to have patriotic movement within the name of what essentially became was a PKK cell is very different, and I think that's why the name was actually changed to the YPS later. I think the Citizen Security Forces or something like that it means. But yeah, I mean, whilst they felt very much like this was grassroots, this was us, it kind of wasn't. There was people above them, or at least people saying, "Oh, that's nice what you've formed there. Anyway, here's how you're going to do it, and here's the weapons we're going to give you." And then just by the evolution of conflict, it wasn't really autonomous anymore.
Yeah, that's an extremely apt observation there. I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're right. That is, it is very similar to that. So yeah, and of course, the older guys in the camp who, remember the Second Intifada and the First Intifada, and sort of the way that the young men were organizing themselves before. Mostly into like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades or Hamas, just sort of like stratified very, very much like that. And they were, brutalized. They were defeated. They were brutalized. The Palestinian people haven't forgotten it. So I think that that's sort of like what's caused them to say, apart, we're going to get our asses kicked. Together, that's kind of the only chance we have. So I think that's where it's coming from.
Okay, and what kind of response has Israel had towards the Lions then? What have they said about them? What have they done about them?
So like I said, they've tried to throw the old but faithful terrorist stamp on them. But like I said, it's much, much harder to point at them and be like terrorist than it is to Hamas or really any like PIJ. It's very easy to point at PIJ, even if PIJ were to be doing, the same exact thing as the Lions Den.
Sorry to butt in there again, but just again, for anyone that doesn't know, I know this is a very complicated topic with many different factions. PIJ is Palestinian Islamic Jihad. From their name, you can guess what they're about. They're another resistance group inside Palestine. A lot more extreme religiously than other groups, and less extreme religiously than other groups. It's a mix.
Yeah. So even if PIJ were doing the exact same thing as the Lions Den, it's much, much easier for Israel to point at Palestinian Islamic Jihad and be like, they're terrorists. Like no one's gonna really second guess that, particularly in the Western world. But when it's the Lions Den and you look at like, it really is like, it just strikes me how sort of like righteous this all is. Like these young men know that what was done to them for the first 20 years of their lives and continuing is wrong. Like when you look at it, what was done to them was wrong. And they are basically saying, we're not going to let this happen anymore. We're not going to let you in the camp. And like I said, they're not sending people into Tel Aviv to do shootings. It's very much like, this is our camp or our town, we are going to protect it. And again, they try and throw the terrorist label on them, but I haven't seen it hold up very much, to be honest. Like even when it's interesting now, I just realize this, like when you see CNN reporting on it, they're not saying, terrorist group, they're saying, like militant faction or, armed group or whatever. It's very different from the framing around Hamas, PIJ. So, I lost my train of thought there, but basically it's sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but that's basically what I was saying.
It happens to me every minute of the day, don't worry. The attack, there have been various attacks off the back of the raid on Jenin. What has the Lions Den's participation been in that?
Militarily, they have not participated, but like I said, they are always issuing statements of support, issuing footage from there, trying to support them. We could probably honestly do a whole episode just on the Jenin Brigade and their history from the Second Intifada till today, because Jenin is actually much smaller than Nablus, and it's probably got an even richer militant history over the past 30 years. So they can certainly handle themselves up there. But the Lions Den, they I haven't seen him, make any sort of appearance militarily. But yeah, it'll be interesting if they both continue to gain power. Like I said, it's very close by. Sadly, Israel controls all of the roads in between all towns in the West Bank, essentially. So, or they can, if they just snap their fingers. So, like I said, I don't think that we're going to see much of the Lion's Den outside Nablus, but support is certainly there.
Right, and it kind of, I mean, just for anyone who doesn't realize, like Nablus is a very, very significant location. It's not like, well, if they don't spread out there, it doesn't really matter. Like, this is a serious stronghold, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the Balata refugee camp, which has over 10,000 people in it, I believe, is just on the southern tip of that. And the Balata battalion on its own is a very significant militant force, which is different from the Lion's Den. I'm not sure how much cooperation is between the two, because it would be much easier for the two to cooperate. But yeah, and it's very much kind of similar to Gaza. It's a lot of, or it's a majority of young people. Excuse me. It's just mostly young men, like young men without, they don't have job opportunities there. They don't. A lot of sadly, a lot of Palestinians, as you know, have kind of turned to being refugees, going to places like Greece or Europe to try and, just fleeing, basically trying to make a life for themselves. Like, because there is no future for a lot of these Palestinian young men other than martyrdom. Like, that's the way they see it. So, yeah, it's basically these camps are full of young, mad, jobless men. And history shows that's quite the recipe. And yeah, it's all about sort of kind of bottling that energy and turning it in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I was actually in prison in Turkey with a Palestinian lad who he several members of his family had been killed in an airstrike there, and he was kind of just saying the same thing. He was like, fuck it, like there's just nothing there for me. And he was saying like he tried to kill himself, and then he luckily didn't die, and then he was like, right, I just decided, he got blown up pretty badly, had all these fucked up scars, and he decided, right, there's like, I gotta leave, I gotta go somewhere else. And yeah, he was telling us some stories like it's not like this kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of destitution there. It's not just all militancy. There's many different factors as to why this is happening.
Yeah, there's families there. There's you got. That's the other thing. It's like these young men have lives. It's so sad because there was one guy in particular. Wrote his name down. So Abud Sob, Sobh, I believe his last name is spelled. He had descended. He kept putting off getting married. He had a fiance and he kept putting it off and then one day he went to the marriage office and was like, we're not getting married anymore. It was really hard for his family, and then 2 days later he was killed, basically, as a Lion's Den member. Israel invaded Nablus and killed him, and it just goes to show, like, he knew he was going to die, and his family, they kind of knew it too. And, they wanted him to marry his fiance, but he was just like, it's not in my cards. It's not, I can't have this life, basically. And, yeah, so it just speaks to sort of like the fact that these young men have lives themselves, and they essentially are giving them up to protect this camp or this town.
That is interesting. That's a real. So it's really. I mean, it's changing the culture in a way. I mean, not changing culture, but that is, even back in the day, fighters would still get married and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's sad because they know, like, they don't want to leave a fiance or a child behind. It's to not have anyone to take care of. So yeah, it's affecting that.
That is interesting. It's an ideological change, I would say. That is, I mean, it seems like a small detail, but that to me is actually really quite interesting. Yeah, it's different. In terms of like training and stuff like that, how do they do that? Do they have training camps? Obviously, I know that all the more traditional militant resistant groups out there are very known for all of that. We've seen the same sort of thing with the Lions Den. I imagine it's a lot harder to do in Nablus rather than like Gaza.
The state of surveillance and drones, as you're aware, it's very difficult. Like the West Bank is so heavily monitored. It's very hard to have like, an outside training camp. So I think a lot of their training consists of inside, and I have seen a few, if you look on that Telegram channel, I'm sure you'll see some footage of them training. But as far as like training camps go, it's not, I haven't seen like big training camps. And it's interesting. I'm sure that the Lions Den like drill together, but I wonder, this is just a question. I wonder how much difference the political factions have with, military training. Like, I wonder if, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is training their fighters as much as, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighter. I wouldn't think so in my head, but, you never know. So I do wonder how much that plays into it and whether or not they just sort of discard that and all train together as a Lions Den. I'm not sure, but
that's a good point.
They're always doing marches and whatnot in their uniforms, like you were saying. So, they certainly are together. I'm willing to bet that there is some training involved, but it's also not. See, I bet that's sort of something that Hamas operative that was there earlier that I was talking about. I'm willing to bet that had some sort of role in it. Because it's very hard to have like. It's very different in Gaza in the West Bank as far as like advancing militancy goes. Like, it's much easier in Gaza than it is in the West Bank just because of how many eyes Israel and PA have on it. So I don't know exactly how much they're training, but I'm sure they're getting it in, most likely inside.
Yeah. It's interesting to see Lions Den out and about in force in the neighborhoods, like the more traditional groups. I remember you would always see like PFLP and DFLP, even as far as like over a year ago, like a couple of years ago, they'd be out in the streets, full uniform, weapons, giving out sweets. But it was always like the bigger groups like that. It wasn't really the smaller factions. But it seems Lions Den, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think I am from what I've been looking at.
No, yeah, you're right.
Like Lions Den seems to really be out there.
Yeah, they're not afraid to show their face around the town, and it just goes back to what I was saying about fish and water. It's like you're going to have a much easier time as a militant faction that is stationary. That is like going to be staying there. You need to have that sort of repertoire with the civilian population, or else you're in deep shit basically. But you don't really see too many of those other marches. Like, I haven't seen an Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade march or a Hamas march in Nablus in a very long time. So I just seen Lions Den. So I think that they're the ones who are like, all right, enough of the sort of in-faction fighting and kind of the dick measuring contest of a lot of these marches, which I think they kind of end up being with amongst the other factions. So I think it's kind of cool that they're just saying, let's put all that aside, throw on the Lions Den uniforms and march.
Yeah, I'd love to know how real that actually is once you're amongst them. I'd love to make a documentary about them. I think they're fascinating. To sum up then, just to recap before we finish this, what is it that makes Palestine's Lions Den group so popular?
I think that it's the fact that they're unafraid to confront the real problems as opposed to the things that the Palestinian Authority is focusing on. I think that young people recognize them as being sort of legit and like as a legitimate avenue to risk their life fighting for. And I think that it's sort of just that I think everyone kind of realizes like our problems start with the occupation and end with the occupation. Like, unless we take care of that, it doesn't matter what happens because we're going to be under occupation. And I think it's that mixed with the fact that they're a group of young men themselves. There's not an old leadership as far as we know. And so this makes them extra, marketable on TikTok and Telegram and everything like that. I think it's just a disenfranchised young man's dream, basically, of sort of like this righteous force that's going to protect your town or whatever. So I think it's just that sort of view of it that's spread prolifically throughout Palestinian youth.
Interesting. All right, mate. Thank you very much. I think your work on Palestine is excellent. Where can people get hold of you to look at that or get you onto projects or whatever?
Yeah, you guys can check me out on Twitter at Koonce_Matt, KOONCE_MATT. Yeah, thank you for having me on, Jake. I appreciate it.
No, you're right, man. And get prepared, because, I mean, we'll get it. I'll get it. You're going to get loads of people, calling you a piece of shit, like, for even covering this. This is one of them conflicts where, you have to ignore everyone. Basically, everyone will hate you no matter how you cover it, if you cover it like a journalist as opposed to an activist. But it is how it is.
I suppose that means you're doing a good job, huh?
Oh, yeah. Everyone hates us. It's great. All right, mate. Speak soon, man.
All right. Talk to you later, man.
That was researcher Matt Koonce talking to us about the rise and popularity of the Palestinian militant resistance faction known as Lion's Den. To support us and to get yourself lots and lots of extra content that you won't find anywhere else, go to patreon.com/popularfront. We're trying to make a lot more documentaries this year, trying to go a lot further afield. Some very unique documentaries planned that no one else has done. To do that, we need to keep things funded. And as you know, we do not accept corporate sponsorship or any fucking corporate bugmen type freaks into our organization. So support us, patreon.com/popularfront. The more we make there, the more we can put out. Ask anybody. That is definitely how it's been going. We'll be 5 years old in May. Hopefully this year can be the biggest yet. Thank you to our sponsors. They are Oracle Coffee Shop in Portland, Oregon, USA. They're an independent coffee business selling only fair trade products. See them at 3875 South West Bond Avenue, 97239. Also, thank you to Grindcore House, a pair of independent coffee shops in Philadelphia, USA. One in South, one in West. You can find them on social media at Grindcore House. And thank you to Propagandopolis, an outlet selling and writing about historical conflict propaganda from around the world. You can buy prints at propagandopolis.com. Use a promo code POPULARFRONT10 for 10% off. You can also buy merch at our shop, popularfront.shop. If you want to follow us on social media, Twitter at popularfront_, Instagram at popular.front, TikTok at popular.front, YouTube, watch our documentaries, please. That's the main thing. Watch and share our documentaries. youtube.com/popularfront. Check us out there. For all our links, go to popularfront.cc. You'll just see all the links there. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home and the outro was by Sam Black. Check out Sam's music at samblackpf.com. He has control of the Spotify. So if you're asking Jay, why haven't you uploaded more of Sam's music to Spotify, message Sam, bully him into doing it if you want to hear it up there. Remember, a lot of the stuff, some of it we've used has uncleared samples, so we can't put it up there, but a lot of the stuff doesn't. So yeah, get onto samblackpf.com. Thank you very much to the high tier Patreons. They are Viola Forvel, Christian Bustamante, Mike Jones, Britt Richardson, Victor Villa, Daniel Verdin, Margosha, Rohan Irvine, Titus Perkins, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Claire Hoffbauer, Benjamin Topper, Chongus Bongwater, Siddhartha O, Damien, Cameron Collins, Nicholas Blomberg, Matthew Diffley, Claire, Liana, Robert, Sean, Christianovich, NTHG, Arturo Rafael Macias, Ethan Zwick, Kefir is the Mind Killer, Elise Middlefire, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, Brendan Crave, B, RX, Ben Marshall, Dallas Dunn, LD50 Seattle, K Glitter Vulcan, Adam H, Derivative Fool, Bottle of Water, Larson 8669, Bjorn Kirsten, DS, Michael O'Connor, Jack Doherty, Nicholas Butter, JD, Jav, James Cully, Tynan Daly, Ethan, Shanklin the Painter, Fitz Madrid, Ed Coulthard, D-San, Mike Barone, Ben, Chris Cusimano, DZA, Georgia Arani, DR, Amy R, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Amelia Me, Christina Rivetti, Freya Northman, Neber, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochran, Young Wasabi, excuse me, Tony Bin, JL, Stephen Davila, Dan Dunham, Chad Walker, Lawrence Abrahams, Peter McCormick from What Bitcoin Did, Christopher Martin, Ryan Sandercock, and Maurice Zumbul. Thank you all so much. If you want to keep this going, patreon.com/popularfront or patreon.co/support. Cheers.